Good morning, everybody. Today's Monday, May 5th. I'm Jon Weigell here with Saul Gonzales and Madi Bolanos from the California Report, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. California recently granted a fast food minimum wage hike in mid-2024. Workers in the fast food industry are now pocketing $20 per hour over there, but there's a new campaign to push that even higher in 2025. So let's look at how this wage hike has affected the fast food business as a whole, workers in the business, and the fourth largest world economy, i.e., California. Thankfully, I'm joined by Saul Gonzales and Madi Bolanos from the California Report podcast to talk about all that. But first, let's give the hits and headlines in business and tech. Starting off today, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway CEO and the world's most famous investor, will be 95 in August, and yet everyone is somehow shocked in the business world with news that he's passing leadership of his obscenely successful firm to a hand-picked successor whose name is Greg Abel, starting in 2026. But if you're at all worried about the future of Berkshire Hathaway and its $347.7 billion pile of cold, hard cash, we're just not the same, you and I. Next, Live Nation's Q1 earnings showed that live music is booming. It encompasses 74% or $2.5 billion of the company's overall earnings for the whole quarter, while its $3.4 billion in revenue was down 11% from 2024. That still beat analyst estimates, and Live Nation said there are 60% more shows playing in stadiums this year than last year. Next, company towns are kind of back. Starbase, where almost all residents are SpaceX employees, is officially incorporated as a Texas town. You'll never guess what company its new mayor works for. And finally here, Google's Gemini accomplished a big feat recently. It beat a 29-year-old video game. Gemini 2.5 Pro completed Pokémon Blue over the weekend on a live stream created by a software engineer not affiliated with Gemini, a feat that Google CEO Sundar Pichai celebrated on X. I celebrated pretty hard too, and I beat it when I was 7 years old. Okay, look, side hustles fail when they consume all of your time. I mean, every single bit of it. The pros, though, work smarter with AI doing all the heavy lifting. To help you out, we just dropped the Side Hustle Accelerator database. You can search your exact problem for your side hustle, grab the perfect prompt, and get results. If you're struggling with marketing, content, and customer service, it's all solved in just seconds. This isn't just another tool, guys. It's your unfair advantage in a spreadsheet. So stop asking AI the wrong questions and start scaling with what actually works. You can get it for free in the link in our show notes. And you can stop right now, actually. Why don't you take a look down at those show notes and tap the link. You don't want to sleep on this. Okay, on to the main story today. As I said up top, today we are joined by Madi and Saul from the California Report to talk about fast food minimum wages in California and how they're changing the industry. Let's talk about it. So welcome Saul and Madi to the show. Great to have you both here. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's a lot of fun.
It's a pleasure. You know, I've been interested in this topic for a while, so it'll be really cool to chat with you guys about what's going on over there in California, because last year, as we all know, the minimum wage for fast food workers in California went up to $20 an hour, which sounds pretty good. But first, can we talk a bit about the history of fast food worker wages in California? Because I know it's a bit intricate.
Sure. So, like you mentioned, on April 1st of last year, California implemented a $20 per hour minimum wage for fast food workers. And that's a significant increase from the previous $16 an hour. That was through Assembly Bill 1228, which also established a fast food council to help set industry standards and adjust wages annually. Mm-hmm. Historically, California has led the nation in progressive wage policies. And that makes sense because fast food was born in California.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Just to jump on that, I remember going to raise the minimum wage protest not so long ago. It's not ancient history, right? Where the big goal was, you remember the fight for 15 to get up to $15 an hour in minimum wage. And I remember thinking, that's not going to happen anytime soon, right? It just seemed so far-fetched then. And that wasn't so long ago. We have a higher minimum wage in California than $15 an hour.
Sure.
We do lead the nation. And some California cities, like West Hollywood here in Southern California, are higher than that, higher than the state's minimum wage or even this fast food wage. So it's just really interesting to see how this issue has gone from kind of on the fringes over the last 10 years to resoundingly in the mainstream. I think what sociologists call that the Overton window, when something that seemed crazy not so long ago is now kind of widely accepted, some idea. And in this case, it's generally a really high minimum wage, at least compared to many other parts of the country.
Yeah. The birthplace of fast food, as you mentioned, California is personally like probably my fast food mecca. But what does that do for the overall economy of the state? Is it a huge driver of economic growth?
So much of America's service economy is intertwined with fast food, but particularly here in California, you mentioned it yourself, how it's part of our history. McDonald's, partially born here, Carl's Jr. born here, Taco Bell born here, In-N-Out born here, and so many other chains. So it's kind of interwoven into the economy of California, right? And on any given day, about 500,000 people are working in California's fast food industry. That is probably a lot more people that work in a lot of other big industries here in the state.
Yeah. Definitely. And given all of those employees, how does California handle the fast food industry different, you would say, than any other state? And what is the California Fast Food Council as well? What do they have to do with the whole situation?
I mean, we're the first state to have a fast food council, so that's one way.
It's a big deal.
Most other states apply a uniform minimum wage across all industries. So, for example, Texas follows the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour, and that hasn't changed since 2009. This council is unique because it addresses challenges within the wage theft.
Mm-hmm.
And just on the fast food council front, I mean, that's a really unusual animal when it comes to labor management relations. I don't think there's anything else like it in the country. It's more of a kind of a European model where you have this governing board for a particular industry that represents workers and unions and the industry themselves. I think there are a couple of non-voting state members, right, Madi?
Mm-hmm.
But it's this body that's just about regulating and approving wage increases just for the fast food industry. It's supposed to also look over like labor conditions in fast food restaurants and things like that. And again, it's a very distinctive kind of institution that's supposed to run all of this here in the state of California when it comes to labor management issues in the fast food industry and wage increases in the fast food industry.
It's very impressive how California has this council specifically. And you're right, it is very European more than American, but it's almost a union-esque kind of approach to handling fast food workers in this country, which is very different. And what is this council doing for workers? Obviously, we see the increased compensation, but what else do they provide for these workers that we can't really see as tangibly?
I think it provides a higher living standard. When you have more money, you're able to deal with the rising rent in big cities like the Bay Area and Los Angeles. And when you're making money and you feel financially secure, that can also improve job satisfaction. And in turn, people won't leave their jobs because they're happy where they're at. So that creates stability as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say, just a reality check on this as well, which is, let's say you're working 40 hours a week, which can be unusual in the fast food industry. But let's say that you do, and you're working for an entire year in the fast food industry at $20 an hour. You're bringing home $41,000 plus at the end of the year, less when you include taxes, something in the low 30s. So again, it's a generous minimum wage, but can you live on that in a California city like, San Francisco or San Diego or LA? Likely, it is still very, very much a struggle. And a lot of what you earn, assuming, you're a single earner living alone, a lot of what you earn is probably going to get chewed up by rent, right? Mm-hmm. And housing costs and just the very high costs of doing everything in California.
Yeah, I imagine $20 an hour in LA can't maybe go a very long way, but $12 in San Francisco sounds even crazier to be able to sustain an actual living and live primarily in the city if you want to live in the city and not have to drive in from a San Jose or somewhere else in the Bay Area.
Definitely.
So given that information, have these wage increases done much for workers? Have less people been unemployed because of them? Maybe the amount is more attractive, or has it stayed relatively similar?
That's kind of up for debate. Supporters of the wage hike have cited a couple different studies that show it's actually increased wages by 18%. But the industry obviously rejects those studies and says that they are biased and does not agree.
I see.
Yeah, there was just a study out of Pepperdine University earlier this year, which it concluded that there was a real cost in terms of job losses. And I think everybody agrees that there has been, at the very least, a slight increase in food prices at fast food places because of this minimum wage. Mm-hmm. Again, 2%, 3%, I think we're looking at. And we should also note that this doesn't cover all fast food restaurants. This only covers big chains that have 60 or more restaurants nationally. So again, it leaves out a lot. It also leaves out coffee places and bakeries and things like that, like places you would go buy a muffin or a croissant. Weirdly enough, it is not covered by any of this. So if you're a worker there, you're working under some kind of other minimum wage regimen, likely the state minimum wage.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, given that these fast food giants are kind of the most profitable and the most available in the state, it would make sense why this applies to them, having, as you said, over 60 locations each at least. How has this wage increase changed the business of fast food this year with, tariffs, inflation? How has the wage increase now in California and also nationwide kind of changed the economy?
Well, the industry released its own impact study, and it found that wage increases have reduced fast food employment, shortened workers' hours, and forced a lot of fast food franchises to use more automation, which, as Saul mentioned, has hiked up prices a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that's here in the state.
Yeah. Every time I go to McDonald's, it just seems to be more of an electronic experience and a non-human experience where, you're checking in with a kiosk and making your order there for your quarter pounder and cheese and whatever. And I don't know, is that related to higher minimum wages, or is that just related to wider forces in the fast food industry and in technology? But I also have that thought when I order something at a fast food restaurant that doesn't involve a human being, is this in some way indirectly related to higher wages? I don't know.
The industry would argue that it does.
Yeah, the industry would argue that it does. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are also a lot of other factors like cost-cutting measures. A lot of these companies are using AI and robotics and electronics, as you mentioned, to kind of streamline operations and make things quicker. So that might be something to do with it. So actual people may be less in number, but higher paid potentially in the future. Earlier this year, as I read, it was reported that California would bump up the wage again from $20 up just a little bit, just 70 cents. Do you know the reason for that potential increase, and you think it'll happen?
Higher inflation, rising cost of living, the state's ongoing efforts to address economic inequality. The Fast Food Council is also allowed to revisit these wages often, yearly, so it's not a complete surprise, but it does look like they're trying to keep up with all the rising costs.
Yeah, the $20 figure is not chiseled in stone, right? It is supposed to increase that wage as inflation increases. So it is supposed to steadily go up as inflation goes up. And just another kind of note, and that is, I think generally this has been seen as a success with minimal cost generally. Of course, as we've discussed, there are studies that show otherwise. But I do think there's also a feeling that it is maybe left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, and people who are feeling that we're not prepared for new big increases in the minimum wage. We had this measure that California has voted on in November to increase the statewide minimum wage again. That was rejected. And I think analysts, rightly or wrongly, they point to the fast food minimum wage as being seen by a lot of Californians as something that wasn't maybe so great to do, or at least not great to do again when it comes to a much higher statewide minimum wage industry-wide.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it makes sense that it's slightly increasing year over year, as it should. It's crazy to me what you mentioned earlier, Madi, about Texas not increasing the minimum wage for years and years and years. So at least there is some traction over in California.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for coming on. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. And definitely to all our listeners out there, check out the California Report on any podcast platform you wish.
And can I please shout out our labor correspondent, Farida Javala Romero? She's been covering this extensively, and I would not know as much as I know about this if it weren't for her. So thank you, Farida. We love you.
Awesome. Thank you for the shout out. And guys, have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of HubSpot Media. Our editor is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got a ton more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. If you're not subscribed, go get signed up at thehustle.co/email and follow us on Instagram at The Hustle Daily. We'll catch you later. Building a business can be really lonely. That's why The Hustle is proud to be the lead sponsor of the 2025 OOO Summit in New York City this May. It's the flagship event built by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. You can join us for game-changing sessions from speakers like Andrew Yang, Ankur Nagpal, and Sahil Bloom, plus unmatched networking with fellow founders. The Hustle team will be there with exclusive merch and experiences that you won't find anywhere else, and you can click the link in the show notes and use code THEHUSTLE for $100 off your ticket. See you in New York.